Among the many revolutions transforming Bharat today, the most instrumental has been the one taking place in the fintech sector. It has amplified Bharat's digital transformation and unleashed new opportunities for both customers and innovators. Everyone with a mobile device can now access financial services, avail credit facilities, and build a foundation of both wealth and prosperity. It has been made possible by the country's hungry fintech innovators who are building novel fintech products to serve citizens in the farthest, deepest trenches of Bharat itself. Together, the fintech ecosystem is expected to add nearly $400 billion to the economy within this decade itself. But what will be the key trends driving this growth? How will the availability of fintech services change the way people manage and use money? And what more can be done so the fruits of fintech revolution benefits everyone across Bharat? It's time to answer these questions and more on that in this special episode of SeedToScale and CNBC TV 18 presents Decoding Bharat. Today, we're discussing uncovering Bharat's upcoming fintech opportunities, which is the theme of the show. So joining us today are leaders and visionaries of India's fintech sector, here to share how each of them has shaped the fintech revolution and how they see it evolving in the future as well. So with us in the studio is Anand Bajaj, founder and CEO, PayNearby, Karthik Raghupathy, head of strategy and investor relations, PhonePe, and we have Manasi Shah, vice president, Accel. The first basic question that begets asking is that finance is finance. How is it different from Bharat versus India? And what is it that y'all have found out in your journey that tells you about this schism, so to say, and the opportunity here? Anand.
So, thank you so much and for bringing out the digital divide between India and Bharat that we are, the 10% digital savvy segment and the 90% marginalized subsidized Bharat that it is. And with growing digitization, you would agree that the gap is only increasing, the digital divide is only increasing. While the most of the big tech is focused on serving the India, be it in payments, rails, or wealth, or insurance, or lending, taking the services to mass Bharat is a challenge, or rather was a challenge. And what we see is that the same solution can be granularized, sachetized, digitized, and universalized to the mass Bharat with the help of a local retailer or with the help of self-help group members. And we see huge opportunity, as you said briefly before, that the Sharpe ratio of India and the opportunity of India versus the Bharat is almost equal. The risk is low here and the return is low, but in Bharat the risk is high, and there we are with the returns.
All right, interesting there. So let's try and size this up. Karthik, you publish a lot of data using PhonePe, and you also have a fair amount of data of payments patterns, etc. Can you help us, basis what you have on your platforms already, size this opportunity?
Sure. So at the outset, I think I'd like to begin by dispelling a bit of a myth. I think many people intuitively may assume that rural India or Bharat is not necessarily digitally savvy. From our vantage point, it's actually certainly not true. So to substantiate it with data, so out of a population of more than 1.4 billion in our country, about 70% lives in towns or villages with population less than 25,000 people, right? So that's about 1 billion people who live in Bharat, if we were to use that definition for the purpose of our discussion today. If you then look at data that we have published on PhonePe Pulse, out of our base of more than 550 million registered users, around 70%, meaning around 350 million or more registered users of ours, are in Bharat. So clearly the UPI user base is representative of the population because 70% of our population does live in Bharat. We launched Pulse with exactly this premise, which is that at our scale, the trends and insights that we see in our data are representative of the nation. So if you go to the website, pulse.phonepe.com, you'll actually find that digital payments is well penetrated in every nook and corner of the country. So rural India is already very digitally savvy. They have a bank account, they have a smartphone, and they're very comfortable doing digital payments. That being said, the opportunity ahead of us is also massive. In our estimate on today's terms itself, there are about 250 to 300 million Indians in rural India who already have a bank account but aren't yet on UPI. So if you take that into account and our demographic trends, there is a significant amount of headroom ahead of us. So there is a sizable opportunity to build many digital first businesses that are not only tapping into our existing base of digitally savvy Bharat, but also a tremendous growth potential over the next 5 to 10 years.
Right. So putting both what Anand said with Karthik, one understands that there is a fair amount of opportunity. There is also there is use case for sachetizing, granularizing all these services, etc. So the question then to you, Mansi, is that will it be done by existing platforms because there is an existing opportunity, or should one expect new platforms to emerge? How does that work?
We're believers in the right product and the right empathy for the right audience. So, as Karthik mentioned, PhonePe is representative. It has the distribution. I think there are a lot of opportunities to build on that, for an existing player. That said, I think there is room for a lot more innovation and fresh thinking, where many new players emerging. I think there is a different innovation both on the manufacturing side of products. So when you think about credit for a new rural customer that is for moving from informal to formal banking, what needs to be done on underwriting, collections may need to be completely rethought. Similarly, for insurance, what does micro insurance look like is something that needs to be rethought from ground up and restructured. The other kind of big innovation that I see where I think newer players will emerge is a differential distribution. So what works for Mansi or Mangalam as a product may need a different user experience for the rural audience. There is often trust built through a human that needs to be done differently. And you still need to do it efficiently in a way that makes the business model work. And I think that's where I see a lot of innovation coming from new players as well. So I'm a believer where there is room for a lot of new emerging entrepreneurs and opportunity in the future.
Anand, you have an interesting background. You have nearly 5 patents to your name in improving convenience of the banking system. PayNearby, if I get the model right, what you're basically doing is creating a lot of these systems, POS systems, over 1.5 million retailers which you target, and then the entire community around it can go ahead and undertake whatever financial transaction that they have to through that system. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
So what are the innovations that you're doing, and what is special about you that is unique about for Bharat or the customers out there itself?
See, Mangalam, the whole idea of India and Bharat is essentially the digital savvy segment, which is self-service conducive, and the mass Bharat, which needs little nudge. To go to 25th floor in your building, you need the lift to be taken from the ground floor. That is where we are, probably, and helping the citizens to go on self-service, but from assisted service. The retailer here, the self-help group member lady here, helps the consumer, the citizen, to avail those services today, and helps them get onto the self-service modules subsequently. The whole idea of rural obligations for insurance, the regulator has come out saying RUSO, rural service obligation, and we say mat RUSO, because it is an opportunity, not an obligation. The railroads are already laid. That is unique. Now, with every incremental product that you put on my rail, it's a Mal Gadi, Savari Gadi, or a Rajdhani Gadi, it will ply on the same railroads to the mass Bharat. If you talk of lending, the new modules which are evolving on OCEN framework, on ONDC framework for credit, insurance, or for investment, all of those tech can be now sachetized and dispensed in assisted mode in the mass Bharat. I think that's what is making us unique, and all of this is at a variable cost. The partners who join us in this whole campaign do not need to separately set up large teams to reach mass Bharat, the equal quantum what they have done here in India to the Bharat. They can harness this railroads that is already available.
What's in it for the ones who have a POS in their system?
At a retail store, so many people come to avail banking financial services. They end up buying grocery from the same store probably. They help augment the credibility of the retailer. They help generate revenue of the retailer. And I think it's a propulsion because once you have come here to avail 1, 2, 3 service, then the 4, 5, 6 service are relayed. It's a flywheel of Amazon sort. More customers coming to retailer for more services brings more partners.
Karthik, I want your thoughts on something that you did speak about payments, did speak about participants in the UPI, etc. But now we're looking at life beyond payments as well. There are a lot more other financial services that everyone's eyeing as well. What are the early adoption trends here, and what's the size of the opportunity?
I think while rural or Bharat is in more early stages when it comes to financial services, I think we're already seeing a lot of green shoots and a lot of momentum. as an example, if you look at our insurance policies that we distribute on PhonePe, about 50 to 60% of the insurance policies that have been bought on PhonePe are actually bought from users in what we call tier 3 cities and beyond. Again, it's the same definition of Bharat. We published these stats again on the Pulse website. So you can actually see that insurance is being purchased in both large and small towns. And what you will actually see over the next 5 years is as UPI penetration increases, as more use cases are unlocked, to Anand's point, as more digital services are introduced, what we have seen that in our data is that consumption increases, which then leads to the next natural step, which is financial services. So consumption leads to demand for credit, for insurance, for wealth. And we're seeing this already in metros, and we're seeing the early stages of this in Bharat. So the road ahead is certainly very exciting.
Manasi, what are the segments where you see, it having reached an inflection point? Say, this is the total addressable market. This is the proportion which has now reached digital in metros. This is the proportion which has reached digital in Bharat. And that's where the headroom is. What are these areas of inflection point, and how can entrepreneurs benefit from this?
I think the rails that we're discussing are really exciting. And I think that's the starting point to find the next thread from. So if you think about, Aadhaar leading to Jan Dhan account openings, we have, I think the latest number is 500 million plus accounts. And, there's hard data today, there's econometric data that, some research organizations like CIIECO have published that once you have an account, the women in the household that have this account are much more they're going to participate a lot more in household decisions, and that household is actually much more likely to take formal credit instead of informal. So I think the next wave that is like ready for an inflection point is definitely credit that is thought differently in terms of the format, that builds in the income seasonality, that builds in the multi-income household statuses that often exist in rural India, and really make that engine work for that given audience. The other area that I'm really excited about, and again, Karthik mentioned insurance. I think it's one of the biggest kind of shock-inducing events, which is either health calamity or death of a family member. And I think insurance penetration needs to be done differently in rural India. So super excited about that opportunity. The last kind of one that I'm keeping an eye out for, where we might be a little bit early, but there is definitely potential, is wealth. Today, still a lot of the the savings are in cash, in gold, and I think this kind of the financialization of these savings is something very exciting. And 20% of actually the rural audience has more per capita consumption capacity than 50% of the urban audience. So there is this emerging rich rural audience that means differential wealth solutions that also can be very interesting.
Manasi, Karthik, Anand, you guys have whetted our appetite. What we'll do is take a short break, come back, discuss the challenges and the threats that may happen in the Decoding Bharat Fintech series. Come back and we discuss all of this with the opportunities there are. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching us here on SeedToScale and CNBC TV 18 present Decoding Bharat. We're discussing uncovering Bharat's upcoming fintech opportunities. We have a battery of guests out here. Anand, you've spoken about the returns which are there in Bharat. What are the risks? What are the challenges? And how do you navigate through those? Anand, go first.
See, the real risk is in identifying the right partners who are collaborating, who are co-opting your vision to make Har Dukan Digital Pradhan or Har Nari Digital Prabhari. When we say it sounds like a slogan, but what you have to do really is to identify the right partner, do their right calibration on the platform, train them, skill them, test them, and then see their appetite, their area, feed them with data to do the right sizing, right services. A hardware shop, for example, sees a footfall of mason, plumber, electricians, painter, carpenters, maids. They would probably be more conducive to a particular type of service like a insurance or a remittance or a train ticket booking, for example. You can't push every service to every shopkeeper. A pharma store, for example, would easily be able to dispense an insurance. So to go and then capacitize those relevant partners with right aptitude to dispense the services. Of course, the branding, of course, creating a pull between the citizens coming to those stores is, I think, a great challenge. And having said that, when you set up a counter, set up a store and train them, and the supply side pipe breaks down, that's a havoc. Imagine on a Kisan Samman Nidhi being dispensed in 3 days' time, and suddenly a bank pipe or a connectivity to processing engines go for a toss. How do you have a backup is the real effort. Of course, in digitization, unlike the earlier manual transaction platforms, everything is 1 or 0. So you know where the money is. And to the back end, we ensure the real challenge is to automate or eliminate, because at scale that you go, you can't do manual work. And stability before scale. Before you start scaling, you have to ensure that your shop is in order and you are equipped to handle that 700 rupee failed transaction, which the customer will not report to Madam Nirmala Sitaraman on a Twitter, but will bend on the knees and report to Allah Ta'ala.
Got it.
So you have to be very, very on the toes every time to ensure that the transaction is in or out, and if it is out, it is back in.
Karthik, you would agree with a lot of the things that have been said out here, but if I may, if you want to add on to that, the early threats, risks, challenges that you faced.
Yeah, I'll talk about the challenges in the context of what I see are the differences, both on the merchant side and on the consumer side, when you think about Bharat versus, say, the metro population. I think the first one, and Anand has already talked about this, what we see on the merchant side is that their needs are similar. So they all want to accept digital payments, they want audio confirmation devices, they want credit. But because the density of merchants in small towns and villages is lower, the distribution model that players like us have to take to them to reach them is quite different from the metros. So while in metro areas, you have the merchant density to be able to send an agent, as we go into smaller tehsils, smaller town centers, villages, a more viable distribution model is through partnerships, which is what Anand spoke about, or through freelancers who work on more of task-based or outcome-based activities. So that's an important difference, which results in a challenge and a very different kind of go-to-market model. The other difference that we see, and again, is more driven by supply. So here again, if I look at, say, the way consumers interact in small towns, is that their needs are similar, they operate very similarly, but the mix of use cases that they have is driven by the supply of online merchants and offline merchants that are today reaching them. So for example, in online, we see that the penetration of e-commerce, travel, food, these are all way less penetrated in Bharat than in the metros, which is intuitive because these categories haven't yet opened up at scale. And this is clearly an opportunity for entrepreneurs. So if I were to look at or take on Manasi's hat, this is definitely an area where investors can look at building businesses in these areas. Interestingly, entertainment like OTT platforms, gaming, these are already actually well penetrated in the online segment in Bharat. In offline, again, we see a similar difference. We see a lower proportion of F&B, retail, healthcare, and a higher proportion of agriculture merchants. Again, it makes sense given the context, but it also highlights the opportunity that you see to build out businesses, especially in these sectors like healthcare and retail.
Mansi, if you were to wear your investor hat now, and from an investment standpoint, what could be the risks here? I mean, there is large competition. There is always that risk of the credit cycle turning against you. Then there is, of course, the regulatory risk as well. Could you size up some of those risks for us? And how should one navigate this space when they're looking at investment opportunities?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest kind of thing that folks find it more difficult to crack is how do you get that volume that Karthik and Anand are alluding to while making economic sense, right? So what unit do you set up that is the engine works well, that's able to acquire in millions very quickly? And sometimes your ARPU or the revenue you'll get per user is going to be much, much smaller. So how do you make that entire engine work? And I think that's where I see when the foundation is not crafted, keeping this audience in mind from the start, sometimes that, it's very hard for it to be an add-on. I think the other kind of piece that you mentioned on regulation is a really important one, because the regulators in India, very rightfully so, are here to protect the consumer. And this is also today, as you said, underserved consumers. So when folks are at their most vulnerable, it's even more important that the right offering is sent to them. So a lot of insurance mis-selling we've seen in the past. There are a lot of folks in a debt trap So how do you kind of navigate these, do right by the customer first? And I think hence the regulatory policy bit also, something you won't run into trouble with. I think the last piece that I'll mention, because especially, I see a lot of entrepreneurs apply technology for, building the scale. I think it's a huge lever, but sometimes I think, especially in financial services, you don't want to over rely on it. There is a human element needed at the right places. That becomes so critical. And I think the very innovative models like PayNearby that bring in the human while still being scalable. But very important to keep that in mind and not just copy paste, some bit of the technology because it should work, rather work backwards from the consumer.
That makes sense. If you had to borrow from the retail world, it would obviously be omni-channel and not entirely digital or entirely physical as well. Before we let you go, just 3-word answers from all of you all. What gives you hope? What scares you? And what is the advice that you would give to someone who's looking to enter this space? Anand.
Advice I would say is Chalo Bharat. Everyone, Chalo Bharat. And hope I would say is Uttishta Bharata, because there is huge opportunity. And what's the third one that you wanted?
What scares you?
Nothing actually. Fully confident, and the whole kainat is standing along. And I would only say, yahi mati ubhregi, yahi zarra chamkega. People are standing by you to help deliver your vision.
Karthik?
I agree with Anand. Actually, nothing scares me. I'm extremely bullish about India and Bharat in particular. I think the advice I would give to entrepreneurs in particular is, it's a large opportunity. We don't have to worry too much about getting everything right at the first time. You get into the game, things will get figured out as you get in, build deep solutions, and really solve for it from a human level, as Manasi already mentioned.
Mansi?
I think what gives me hope is just real pain points that are to be solved. I think those are rare, and when they come in large opportunities, it's always exciting. The other thing that we've not spoken about, but that gives me a lot of hope, is entrepreneurs that are coming from Bharat to build for Bharat. So I'm really excited about the kind of empathy that brings very naturally. And they've all learned lessons from across different places, and they're bringing those back. So that's something I'm really excited and hopeful for. I think the scary part is nothing different from all other journeys. So I'm more hopeful and excited.
All right, everyone's more hopeful than excited. The crop of entrepreneurs that are coming in has a solid piece of advice from all our panelists out here as well. Thank you so much, Mansi, Karthik, Anand, for joining us here. That's it from all of us here in this edition of SeedToScale and CNBC TV18 presenting Decoding Bharat. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good day.